Hello. Marhaban. Good night.
Marhaban, madam.
Hello, all of you. I think we are about to begin. I was waiting for a few more friends that they were going to join, but I think they're going to be a little bit late. But we should begin anyway because we have quite a lot of audience already. So
No problem.
we're waiting for our friend AL-SUWAILEM to join us as well, and we should be ready to begin. I think Sami should be able to come very soon as well. Yeah,
I'm in. I'm just
okay, Sami. Shukran kathiran. So thank you very much, all of the audience, for being here in this webinar entitled The New Normality, the Post-COVID Era. And I'm very, very pleased to be organizing this seminar from the SCIEF Center. As you know, the Spanish Economics Center for Saudi Center for Islamic Economics and Finance is a joint venture between a business school and the King Abdulaziz University, in particular, the Islamic Institute for Economics, that we have here some of its representatives. And together, SCIEF, many of you have joined some of our seminars. We've been collaborating for the last more than 10 years now in contributing to the global financial debate, in particular to see how Islamic finance and ethical finance can contribute into the academics debate, mostly because we are all in academics in the center. And for that reason, we also wanted to contribute in this global crisis because it's probably the biggest global crisis we ever had in the world, at least in this century, well, in this century and probably. And we are very lucky here to have some experts from different angles, and together we'll try to really analyze and find not only what is the correct diagnosis of what is the situation, but also some of the potential solutions. And of course, we are a center of finance, and then we are very lucky here to have Dr. AL-SUWAILEM, that is the acting general director of IRTI. You all know IRTI, the Institute of Economic Research at the Islamic Development Bank. And also, I think I can say my professor on Islamic finance. Most of the things I know came from you and your courses. And we're very lucky to have you here. But in addition to finance, we need to understand what is the economic impact of the situation in the economy. And that's why we are very lucky to also have two world economic experts. We have Dr. FERNANDEZ, that is a professor of IE, and it has like a very interesting background and reputation. Is on the board of the biggest bank in Spain, of PEña, but he's also been working at the IMF. And I think he probably understands better than anybody else the economic situation and the economy in general. And he's a good professor, so he will be able to explain us the economy. We also have with us ZUHAIR HAFIZ, that are also a world economic expert, and he's been also an expert in Islamic economics and the economies of the Islamic region, and in particular of the Gulf. That I think is also particularly relevant for this seminar today. But in addition to the financial and the economic, we need to understand what is the social impact, how is our societies transforming. And we are also very happy to have CRISTINA MUÑIZ. She's a psychologist, a professor as well, a doctor, and she's been working particularly in post-traumatic situation, post-trauma. And in particular, she's handling a group of doctors, people in the health and professionals of the health industry that are particularly being affected by this crisis. But overall, this crisis is a health crisis. So we have with us JESÚS Rodríguez PASCUAL, which is an expert in COVID in Spain. He's a doctor, practitioner in a hospital in Spain. And can also help or shedding some light into the situation. And as you know, we are a very diverse group. We are very happy. We'll be here with you for an hour. You're happy and I ask you please to ask questions. And at the last 10 minutes of the seminar, we will be able to answer some of those questions. So feel free to put your questions on the chat, and then we'll try to answer them at the end. Before that, we'll have a conversation. But to understand that it's a very complex situation, and only complexity can understand complexity. And that's why we have such a diverse panel, such a diverse expertise, and hopefully the different angles will help us design what is the global situation. And I would like to begin by the health situation. So, Jesus, I'd like to ask you, I mean, what is the real situation? Because there is very confusing news. Some people say, I mean, some countries are very much affected, some other countries are less affected. We don't really understand. Do you have, in the health, as a doctor, do you have a more or less an idea of how is the pandemic moving and what is the situation really in the world?
Thank you very much, Celia. If you hear, well, it's very relevant, but it's very difficult to answer this question. So I would like to introduce the medical problem. Medical problem is a very hard problem to explain, but the real name of this virus is not coronavirus, it's SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus, but coronavirus is a family of viruses. COVID-19 is the disease. It was first described in China. So it was first described in China, sorry. But in the few months, then spread very fast to other Asian countries, and then is moving more or less from the east to the west. The majority of infected people, the vast majority of infected people do not present symptoms, but the minority could present the disease, causing cough, fever, muscular pain, and a lower percentage of people could present SARS, a severe acute respiratory syndrome. Surprisingly, the medical data among countries are very, very different, and we don't know why. We don't know the reason of the incidence, the new cases, the prevalence, the amount of cases or the percentage of people affected, the mortality, and the relation between cases and deaths so markedly different. Probably in relationship with healthcare systems or timing. COVID-19 is a problem of timing, time of reaction of the politics in relation with healthcare systems. Maybe with racial, genetic, and cultural differences. But I prefer to describe scenarios. To conclude, we got 2.5 scenarios. The optimistic scenario is that the pandemic disappear, with or without vaccine. The bad scenario, the pessimistic scenario, is that the pandemic disappear and then appears suddenly again in a few months or in a few years. And the health is, well, coronavirus are a very complex family of virus. Common cold is a coronavirus. So common cold, we are with common cold all the years. So we can consider the possibility of a seasonal disease. So it's very, very complicated. Please consider all these scenarios. So this is my...
Okay, thank you very much, Jesus. I think at least we know that we don't know, which is already too much to know. So I hope, Fernando, will go for you now, that you can shed a little more light. How is the economic impact? There's also like winners and losers in countries, industries. What is your vision of it? And how long it's going to last?
Okay, Celia, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to share with you. Let me start with something that Jesus just said. You know, we can draw a very optimistic or a very pessimistic scenario on the economics too. But that was probably the case 6 months ago or 3 months ago. By now, everybody is pretty much on the pessimistic side. We are suffering an unprecedented economic crisis. It started as a typical supply side crisis because of the disruption in production in China. Then it came into a demand crisis aggravated by the lockdown, by the confinement of the people, therefore demand collapsed. And now the dangers will become also a financial crisis. As most of you have already probably know, the estimates of what will the impact on world GDP will be vary immensely, precisely because we don't know how long this will last, and this will tie to the previous medical scenarios. But we do know that it will last. We do know by now that this is not going to be the typical V-shaped recovery where economy plummets in one quarter and then the next quarter life goes back to normal. We know the recovery is going to take some time. It will be gradual as the economy starts operating. Just to give you some figures of what we're envisaging here. We're looking at an unprecedented drop in GDP, basically worldwide. I mean, we're seeing the estimates from the last IMF World Economic Outlook. We're seeing the US expecting to drop by 5% growth, Europe 10%. Most emerging economies will also suffer. The oil-producing economies, of course, and I'm sure we will talk about that later. So I won't talk about that. But so it will be first, it will be huge, it will be widespread. Second, it will have a very significant impact on employment. We are seeing unemployment figures that we had never heard of since the Second World War. Basically, we're seeing the US reporting 36 million unemployed people, 15% unemployment rate, which are European figures in the bad times, but we've never seen in the US, never in our lifetime. Because we basically have never seen the economy stopped for 3 months. And that's what we're witnessing. The big question is how long it will take to recover, as I said, and how permanent the scars will last. We know as economists that the longer it takes for the economy to go back to operate normally, the more permanent the scars will be. So there will be, if the business, stores, jobs remain closed for a long time, it will be hard for the companies to reopen again. It will take a lot longer. They will not reopen as it is. So there's this big question about whether, and I guess this is the big economic question now, should we try to open the economies as soon as possible, assuming a medical risk, or should we not? And this is, I think, what most policymakers around the world are grasping with. Because yes, it is a medical problem, but it will be, it already is, and it will very soon be a very huge economic and therefore social and therefore human problem in the meantime. Just to summarize, we will end up, already we know that we are going to see debt to GDP figures coming up 20 to 30 percentage points. So if, roughly speaking, developed economies have a debt to GDP ratio around 8%, it will be 110%. Now, the question is, of course, who is going to pay this debt? So there are serious intergenerational problems here. Are we going to pass on the cost of this crisis to the next generation? Or are we just not going to pay this debt ever? We're going to live with this debt and assume that we'll have negative interest rates for the rest of our lives. Now, negative interest rates is also a significant intergenerational transfer because we're taking away money from those who have saved and giving it to those who owed money. So there are a lot of distributional impacts on this. And just to finish some of the questions in this spirit, CELIA, of raising more questions than giving answers, there's the distributional issue. Of course, the crisis will have an impact on those who suffer, and those who suffer are the most vulnerable, also in economic terms. So we're seeing, of course, unemployment concentrating on the least, let's say, the less skilled segment of the population, those whose job can be replaced easily or can be done without, and therefore there were significant distributional impacts. All these issues we have to grasp with, and there has been a huge policy response. The good news is it has been coordinated all across the world. We've seen fiscal and monetary policies that we had never heard of. the deficit in the US will be around 10% this year, which is something we've never seen. In Europe, in countries like Germany, we're going to see probably deficits of 5% of GDP. Germany being the sacrosanct surplus economy. Why? Because everybody from the economic policy making is doing the utmost. Now, is it going to be enough? I don't know, and I leave it here.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was the optimistic scenario or the pessimistic one?
This is the real scenario right now, and it could be much worse. I hope it stays like this right now.
Okay, thank you. And I think there will be quite a lot of food for debate, because I'm sure your position as economist and the position of Jesus as a doctor is probably not exactly the same in terms of opening up the society or continue with the social distancing. So I think at the end, that will be an interesting debate that I will...
We have to make both compatible.
Exactly. At the moment, doesn't seem too much, but that will be interesting to see also Jesus' views and how this can be compatible. But I would like now to ask Dr. Omar ZUHAIR, also in the economic point of view, how do you think it's especially affected by the Gulf region, or issues, in general issues like energy, oil? How do you think all this is affecting, or is going to change, or is going to be impacted as well?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I believe using this title of post-COVID-19 era is a right one. But now the WHO starting putting some doubts that it will end, that it may go longer and be something permanent as other viruses there. The executive director of emergency in WHO yesterday only was having a conference saying that this pandemic may go ahead and there is no end for it. It will be added to the other viruses around us, and you will see some people will be killed each year as others viruses doing for the world. So this means that we cannot differentiate between before and after. It is going to be lasted with the whole world. I tried to list how is the scene, if we use your terminology, that post-COVID-19 era, what the scene, the economic scene will look like in our region, the Gulf region. I tried to list 10 phenomena or factors we may face it after we go to another stage of this pandemic. Now, each country is trying to go to normal life, to its best efforts. But I found that after we go from this harsh attack to our system as a whole, to the whole world, we will find in our region 10 phenomena. I will list it quickly. The first one, we will find the less reserves of the sovereign funds. Each country in the region, and as Dr. Fernando said, in other also region, the sovereign funds are going to be less because they started spending on this problem. We will see less government revenues. Our area, as you know, the oil prices has been going down, so less revenues are coming to governments. Third, less private sector sales. Also, the economic situation, as everybody, the recession means that there is a little of private sector sales. Fourth, increase in prices of goods and services. Inflation will be also doing some harmful to the economic system everywhere. Number 5, more unemployment. Unemployment, also Dr. Fernando said about employment. Unemployment is going to be more than before this COVID-19 started. More public debts. We noticed that all countries started to get some loans from inside, from local financial agencies, or from outside. As you all know, IMF started giving a lot of loans to all countries. And we will have also a reduction in export volumes. After COVID-19, we will see a reduction in exports volumes. This is also means that a less of government revenue. Reduction in import, because there is a less income for the private sector. Imports will be less than. Less foreign employment. Now you noticed also a lot of people has started going back to their countries. So the foreign labor available in the region will be less after this crisis. I think banks started making a lot of doubtful reserves in their financial reports. So these are 10 things we are going to witness after this first stage of the pandemic. It seems that an action plan, each country now is preparing itself to make a roadmap for what we have to do after this. I can notice that now the priority of government spending should be discussed. Each country will start thinking where should the government money be spent. This is a big change in the policy, in the financial policy. Also, the way to bring back the sovereign funds, there should be also a plan how we can get back what we lost in our sovereign funds in all countries. Private sector will play a more role in the economy. Now in our region, all countries are planning to get more share of the private sector in the economic system. The third sector will play more important in the social life of these countries and everywhere really. Now, also we started noticing that a lot of finance programs to health sector started, because everybody is saying that health sector needs a lot of development. So more finance.
If you allow me, we will be talking more about the solutions later. So
okay.
Perhaps this is the diagnosis, and I think it's very, very understand and very clear. I think you really get to the point of what is the 10 major crises. And I would like afterwards to come back to you for this third sector, because I'm very much interested in all of these policies that can help us, and in particular the third sector, because I think that you are totally right and it will be very interesting. But I would like first a round of diagnosis. Okay. And we'll go back to you and for more of what type of policies can we do, because I think that would be very, very interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. SAMI AL-SUWAILEM, I'd like to go back to you. We've seen like the global economy by both the global experts. Now, I'd very much like to talk a little bit more about finance and Islamic finance. Many people compare the financial crisis of 2008 to this present financial crisis. Do you think it's anything similar? And also, Islamic finance did very well in the last financial crisis. It's doing equally well here. And in particular, all the things that both Fernando and Dr. Omar say on the debt. What is your opinion of so much debt getting into the finance now?
Thank you, CELIA. Thanks
in 4
to
minutes.
your...
If you cannot answer all that in 4 or 5 minutes.
In 4 minutes? Wow.
Okay.
Well, okay. Let me see how can I squeeze the answer in 4 minutes. First of all, there are two kinds of risks that face the economy. There are exogenous risks that come from outside the system, like tsunamis, like pandemics, like these things, okay? And there are endogenous kind of risk. These are risks that come from within the system. The actions of the players, they cause the cycles and the instability. The financial crisis is a very clear example. The 2008 global financial crisis is a very clear example of an endogenous risk problem, because that crisis was caused primarily by the actions of traders, bankers, speculators, and so on. There was no earthquake or something meteorite that hit the earth and then all of a sudden we are in a crisis. No, it emerged because of the actions of the market players. While the current crisis is caused primarily by an exogenous risk factor, which is the pandemic from an economic point of view. Now, the difference between the two is that financial crises tend to stay longer, cost more to the economy than exogenous risk cycles or cycles caused by exogenous factors. The reason is finance is built on trust, and once something hits this trust, then it is very difficult to get back to build up the trust again. So it takes longer for the economy to recover, and it costs the economy more, and there is a high risk that the economy would lose its potential. Now, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share the screen with you. Shall I show you some graphs or make it later?
We'll make it later because
Okay.
Otherwise we only have an hour, so we need like 4 minutes, and then it will take longer to change screens and all that.
So these are the problem is
you
that—
draw and we'll imagine in our minds.
Okay, so the problem is we did not yet recover from the 2008 crisis when the 2019 crisis hit. See, that's the problem. The global economy did not recover yet from the 2008-2009 crisis. And then we get this hit. So now, effectively, we have double crisis. I will stop here, okay? And then maybe later we can have—
Okay, thank you very much. So we will have a first opinion of all, and then we go back to get in more depth.
Okay.
Thank you. And Cristina, I'd like now to go to you because we talk about the finance, economic, the medical crisis, but I think it's also like a very traumatic social crisis. I don't know in other countries, but in Spain, I mean, there is like a big hit in the society. So I would like you to explain us a little bit more what is happening with our societies, how it's impacting our society.
Yeah, so Jesus and Fernando were talking about the worst case scenarios, and I think from the psychological point of view, what you see when adversity happens is that you see both. So you see the impact of something traumatic as the experience we're going through is going to have a negative effect, but it's also going to have a positive effect. And what does this depend on? It depends on different factors. Some of the factors are risk factors, and some of the factors are protective factors. So as they were, I think Fernando was saying before, if you are a person who are already in a condition of vulnerability, social vulnerability, for example, if you live under poverty, or you don't have a immigration status, or you are experiencing discrimination of sorts, and this hits you, it's going to be a risk factor for being really negatively affected. But if you are someone who has supports in place, who has connections with others, and what we call resilience, which involves a different set, a whole set of qualities and skills, then adversity can actually bring forward growth and development. So we're already seeing this. I was talking to a colleague this morning who is a psychologist in Barcelona in a research institute, and they're already doing research on how this is impacting families here in Spain. And what they're seeing is exactly this, that the one surprising finding was that the economic or social status of the family was the most significant factor of how bad this is affecting the family. But the second element that they observed, or that they are observing, is that surprisingly this experience is bringing positive experiences in people, and they're seeing more intimacy in families, more solidarity, more desire to connect with the neighborhood, with people locally at a local level. And so I think that when we think about adversity in this way, we have to think of both elements, and we can think of those two elements at an individual level, but also at a community and society level. So in what ways is this going to impact? What are the risk factors in a community, in a specific local community or in a larger community? What are the risk factors that this community will be affected negatively, but what are the resiliency factors? How are communities equipped already with the skills to connect with each other, to learn from each other, to share, and to act towards the common good? So that's where, you know, my head is going with this.
Okay, thank you very much, Cristina. Since you're the only one who put a little of light and positiveness, I really appreciate, and I will take your lead in order to begin to talk about solutions. I mean, we'll have about 20 minutes for bringing up solutions, which I think so we should be.
I want to know from
we
this.
begin by the financial first, and then we'll go back a little bit on a round. So at least it's something positive. I mean, that was very helpful. So perhaps, Sami, do you think from the Islamic financial instruments, can we find like some solutions for all these different crises that they are mingling together?
Well, let me share your optimism and tell you that based on the studies by IMF and others, crises emanating from exogenous factors, they tend to be less costly and will take shorter time for the economy to recover. So it is, in my opinion, despite all other negative reports that it will take so long and so on, I think in principle, the economy will be able to recover quickly once the pandemic fades out. The problem is that we don't know when the pandemic will fade out. That's the problem. But once the pandemic fades out, it will be very likely, inshallah, God willing, that the economy will be able to, unlike a financial crisis, that's the big difference between exogenous risks, induced cycles versus endogenous risk. Now, from an Islamic point of view and from general point of view, for exogenous risks cycles, the main line of defense is safety nets. If I go back to the health, we started with health. From an economic point of view, health is a public good, or mostly it's a public good, which means in many cases, I cannot be healthy unless you are healthy. It's not perfectly divisible. If it were perfectly divisible, then I don't care about someone else if he's sick. So in this case, competition would work, market would work. However, in many cases, public goods, there are goods that are public, which means they are indivisible, which means either we are all in or not. Stability, for example, stability is a public good, because as if we are all in the same boat, we cannot imagine one would survive or the other will not. Either we all survive or we all drown. So the same thing with health. Not all aspects of health, but many aspects of health are public goods. Now, the solution for a public good is non-profit organization, non-profit activities. That would lift the economy from this crisis. So I would strongly suggest that we should put greater emphasis on these safety nets.
Thank you very much. I know there is like some people from the public that they are raising their hands and a couple of questions, but we're going to finalize the round and then we'll go to the questions. So a little more patience and then we'll go to you. Shahab, I think is the one. Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Omar, before you were talking about good policies, economic policies that they can help. So Dr. Sami was talking about safety nets and financial instruments to help a little bit those that Cristina mentioned, the underserved, the ones who really are going to be hit. Now, in terms of economic policies, what do you think will be the most, the better economic policies to handle the crisis?
Okay, first of all, being optimistic is very good for everybody, but also we have to be realistic. There is a lot of problems are facing all countries, not a specific country. So because the unemployment is a great problem now for all countries, how we are going to solve this? The banking sector will be having a lot of problems in debts, in financing, how we are going to find finance this. The sustainable development goals have been created some years ago, but a lot of countries are not able to achieve a good progress. Poverty, hunger around the world is hitting a lot of people. This is a real problem. How we are going to face? We are optimistic always, but we have also to be very realistic. This needs a lot of economic policies to be focusing on those severe problems faced by a lot of people. Hundreds of millions are now living under poverty line, according to the World Bank statistics and other concerned organizations. So we are really facing a lot of problems. In the normal life, in normal economic life, the world was not able to solve these problems. What about if we are now facing such a harsh status of the healthy situation in each country? So I believe the economic policy should be very focusing on these levels of poverty and hunger around the world. Now we are very disturbed about having this COVID-19 in a lot of areas for poverty people, poor people, and it is going to move to other rich areas, and so the world is really facing a lot of problems. I think the third sector has to play, as Dr. Sami said rightly, has to play a very vital role to ease of these problems. Now this is a very serious time to make a lot of policies. Islamic economics has a lot of solutions for the third sector. The Islamic economics social economic life is relying on some compulsory movement of income from wealthy people to poor people. This is called zakah, as you all know. Zakah is a compulsory to be taken from the rich to the poor people. So I believe that those countries who are applying Islamic economics rules, they should be taking this zakah as a centralized duties to be taken by the government and be redistributed to the people. It is a levy on wealth, not on income tax, not as an income tax. So this will have a very big impact on the whole economy of the world if we started giving this levy compulsory for rich people. This is enough for me because time is very limited.
Yeah, I guess we can spend hours, and then what I will encourage everybody from the audience and also we is to email some of the questions afterwards, because I think like Dr. Omar has like very interesting suggestions, and I think we probably, and Laura and Gonzalo, that is the director of CEIF, can probably organize some debate afterwards in the blog, and we can just continue these discussions, because this is only like a first snap, and then we can continue in the blog and in other seminars to go more deep into those areas like the third sector that is really, really crucial, as you say. Fernando, any imagination for any solution in the economic level, any policy that it will change the game?
There are many solutions around it. Let me start with something that Dr. Omar said. When the pandemic phase out, I think the problem is by now that we have to get used to the idea that the pandemic will stay with us. And quoting Dr. Fahed Younous, who is the a virologist, a specialist in infectious diseases at the University of Maryland, says we have to learn to live with the pandemic. Because this is the fact of life. And we have to resume the economy working with a risk, with a significant risk. Unless we do that, everything else is just not going to work. Unless we're able to, unless we start bringing the economy back to work, opening the factories, opening the offices, opening the universities, opening the stores, opening tourism, Of course, we have to do it a different way. We are all, at least in Spain and in many countries, we have been aware of the seriousness of the illness, and therefore we're going to be a lot more careful in our social contacts. But we have to assume and we have to be willing to take some risks. That's my first point. The second point is that there are lessons in, and Dr. Sami was right, that this is an exogenous crisis. And in that sense, it is easier to deal with. But we have to make sure that we don't make 2 or 3 big mistakes, which are potentially possible. One of them is to go back to protections. I don't know the details, but I just learned today that the Secretary General of the World Trade Organization has resigned. This is bad news. It is bad news in as much as it means that we do need a very strong World Trade Organization making sure that trade resumes. Yes, exports and imports levels will go down, as Dr. Omar was saying, because obviously there will be less trade, but we have to make sure that we don't go back to protectionist, mercantilistic policies. We do know that trade among countries makes life easier for everyone. There are winners or losers, but everybody loses if there's no trade. So that's important to make sure that we do not go back to, we are seeing serious protectionist measures, obviously in the US, but also in Europe. And I'm very, we in Europe are very happy to criticize President Trump's policies, but we have to realize that some of the policies that I see coming up from the European Commission, when they talk about this strategic European renewal, to me sound very much like Fortress Europe and are very dangerous. Second point, we have to make sure that growth is our foremost policy. We do know that the best equalizer is economic growth. We do know that the way to deal with poverty, with unemployment, is to resume growth. So we have to make sure that we put in place policies that are able to give us back this 2-3% GDP growth rate that we had in the US or in Spain, and that we need to be able to bring these people back to work and to be able to have enough fiscal revenue to therefore distribute and take care of those who need it. So growth is the second very important point. And the third is be careful about, and I'm finishing here, be careful about overregulation. There is a tendency, the pendulum swings all the time. And as we saw in the financial crisis, that we overregulated to some extent, that we're now going back to it because of the under-regulation at the beginning that caused the crisis. We have to make sure that here we do not regulate so much the private sector that we make it impossible to grow.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you so short, all of you, but then we only have an hour and too many people talking. Cristina, any solution for the social trauma? A quick one, because we don't have much time. I want to have at least 7 questions.
I'll be quick. I think we should focus on a lot of the things that have been said. Is interesting that they are directly related to our psychology and our society, how they're going to experience this. One area is to reduce the risk factors, and that involves working on strengthening safety nets, providing basic services, healthcare, which in Spain we're kind of lucky that we have public, but there's many countries and places where they don't. So providing investing in health services and supports, community supports to strengthen the safety nets and reduce the risk factors, but also focus on the strengths in the communities, which involves creating opportunities for connection. For mental health, connection, emotional connection is what for medical health is water. We need water for our physical health. We need emotional connection for our mental health. And in these situations like this, more than ever. So creating opportunities, rewarding opportunities of pro-social behavior and strengthening the resiliency of communities, whatever they are with each specific culture, which involves spirituality. Spirituality is a huge source of resiliency for communities. So strengthening those sources of strength in each country and culture. So those are some of the ideas.
Well, I think we are in a good place in the Islamic Center for both community and spirituality. So I think we like very much those comments. And I like to finish this round and then go back to the questions with Jesus. Please, are we going to have the COVID vaccine very soon?
Well, that's the point. The European Union spent 2 billion euros in investigation in the United States, in many countries. It's not so easy A few days ago, Dr. Fauci, very famous and relevant COVID expert in the United States, said that the vaccine seems come very soon. I'm not so optimistic. You need to move the vaccine from animals to human beings models, then to prove in phase 1 to make the safety, then moving to phase 2 and 3 to save effectiveness, and then to administrate to the entire nation or the entire nations. So it's not so easy. The vaccines, not only the vaccines could fail. So in my opinion, this is my opinion, the vaccine we cannot develop in a few months. It is not possible. It's not realistic. So probably the pandemic.
You are working on one vaccine, right?
No, we are working to treating patients with drugs. In my investigation, I try to make to be better the evolution of the patients. We cannot cure the coronavirus. The coronavirus is cured by my own immune response, but suddenly the immune response fail and the lungs and the other organs could be affected. But we are trying not to cure, but to save patients, try to avoid the death. This is my not so optimistic focus of the medical problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we exactly say 45 minutes, we've done it. So we have about 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, we've done it because I'm cutting you, and I'm very sorry for doing that.
We saw, CELIA, we solved the global economy problem in 4 minutes, so that's very good. Right?
That's great. So I will appreciate now the audience. Yes. I will now appreciate the audience to be as concise as our panelists. So there is, I know, 3 hands up that Laura is going to give you now permission to talk, and 7 written questions. So we'll go first to the 3 speaking ones, and then I will be reading the other 7. And then I will have like a final round to answer those questions. So we'll try to have them all at once because we will not have the time to answer each one of them. But please, please, please be very concise, the ones talking. So Shahab Khan, can you please say your question? You have, yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Oh, that's great. Good to see all of you here on this platform and, discussing the potential solutions post-COVID. Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's actually what made me interested in it. Now, I could actually relate, a lot of things came up. The 2 things I want to, highlight in the specific time that you've given me. One from CRISTINA, and the other from Dr. SAMI. Actually, what she mentioned, there are two important things that she mentioned. One is the risk factor and the resilience. Now, there's a possibility that once we have these, it's beautifully identified and explained by her that these are the 2 things cropped up after the crisis, that there is a part of population which is actually under risk, and there is a part of population which actually is actually being tested on their resilience. So now you have 2 sections divided here. On the other hand, Dr. Sami mentioned about the safety net and how you can, now I see that how you can bring these 2 things together. And I see a potential solution in these 2 actually, that you are very clear about the division, the impact of this crisis on the society, on these 2 categories of population. And on the other hand, if you are able to provide safety net for, let's say, for the section which is on the risk side, those who are facing more risk, possibly we actually can see a healthier society going forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shahab. I think your point is well taken, and then we'll go back after that to answer that. Thank you very much. Now, Hisham, can you please ask your question? Hisham Daftar.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Actually, I want to take up from what Dr. Sami said before, you know, that of course we live in a fast changing world, and it is dotted with all sorts of natural disasters, and COVID-19 is just one of many, you know, and he enumerated earthquake, bushfires, floods, etc. Now the issue here is with the you know, the driver for economic recovery has always been the private sector, and the private sector has a big role to play here. Now, when the problem is there needs to be a change in the mindset, because when companies prepare their budgets and business plans, they consider such things as production, marketing, competition, market share, and they use these budgets really to you know, assess the performance of their staff. This is a very narrow view, and that is why when the crisis strikes, they become unstuck, and the whole economy will suffer with them. You see, many things get in the way, and these unexpected obstacles can crop up to derail companies. And as Mr. Fernando said, we have to expect that these things are, obstacles are now a way of life, and companies have to start thinking of really budgeting for the unexpected. For the government to just throw money at the private sector, you know, I don't think that, you know, this will be like, you know, putting good money after bad, and it may not really solve the problem.
Thank you very much, Hisham. Well taken, your point. Thank you. And now we have quite a lot of questions. I'm going to try to read a few, and then we'll have like a final round if you want to answer some of them. I think one of them, Jesus, is very direct for you, because it was asking what kind of drugs are you using in your investigation, if you could share it. Only say that. Okay, yeah, perhaps you can answer that, because it's a very concrete, and then I go to the more economic ones.
Yes, I try to prove the effectiveness of tocilizumab. Tocilizumab is an antibody against the immune reaction. The infection, the infection carries an immune reaction in the lungs that can be fatal when we are trying to stop this reaction with this drug. This drug is using against rheumatoid disease, but can be effective. We are seen in a phase 3 trial, so we are waiting for the results.
Thank you very much. Now there is a question. It says to Dr. Sami, what is that? Why governments can change the rules and have like a more equal playing field between debt and equity? It's longer, but I mean, in terms of debt being tax deductible but not equity, and Basel capital charges higher for equity but not debt. Others, I think for both of the economies, talking about the American-China war and what is the role of European Union in that conflict. It's going to be a conflict, only a military or trade conflict? What is, how this is going to play? There is also another question talking about the world economy. It's expected to enter into economic depression. That I think also Dr. Omar can answer that. And that probably is going to be like similar to the global economic crisis during 1929-32, if you think that is anything similar. And there is quite a lot of questions talking about SACAC and social finance and interest-free loan. Some of the audience say that is also like an important thing. And also, I mean, for Cristina, there is any effect of doctors burnout for all this crisis, and they would like to talk to you a little bit more about that. And Dr. Kalim is asking, what is economic prescriptions by AU members and what must be done? I think that's one is for Fernando to finish with, okay? I think more or less, I mean, probably sorry if I read it like very fast and not completely, but thank you very much for your questions. So if you want, we can have like a final round, all of you, to answer whatever aspect you think is interesting. I think the China war is interesting, China-America war, I think it's very interesting for burnout of doctors, I think is crucial. Also some of these ACAC and some instruments for social finance. And also SAMI, this about equity, debt, playing field. But I mean, if you want to answer any other thing, I would like to, perhaps, Fernando, you want to start? Because I have you positioned here in my computer.
Okay,
Any preference.
Thank you, Celia. I'll try to be very brief. Although I do want to say a little, which is one very brief thing on the debt equity issue for Dr. Sami. Yes, it's very important to understand that in this crisis, we will need equity, not only debt. And I think this issue is becoming crucial also in Western finances. The UK has already led the way in this. I'm not sure we go all the way to change the different tax treatment. That's a long discussion. I won't go into it. But the important thing is, since we will have to take hard choices, and since we will have to make sure that the companies stay alive, companies cannot be over leveraged. So that's one point. Very quickly, on the other 2 points that I guess I'm supposed to talk about. One is the role of Europe in the China-America war. Well, first, let's hope there's no war. What we will see and what we are seeing and we continue to see, because this crisis will not change the world. There are trends that will continue. One trend is the global emergence of China and the increasing rivalry between China and the US, which is now basically a technological debate. Who is going to lead the new world? And this will continue. Just as the digitalization of the world will continue, the dematerialization of the economy will continue, and the delocalization of the economy will continue. Now, the fact that we can now produce almost everywhere, that's also going to continue. So this rivalry will continue. We will see ups and downs. We will see a lot of volatility, but I don't think that the COVID-19 or the SARS or the, I don't know what to call it now, Dr. Jesus, because I used to call it the COVID-19, but you told me it was wrong. But anyway, whatever you call it, I don't think you're going to change this long-term. The world is what it is, and it will continue to be, and there will be. Now, as for Europe, very briefly, one sentence. This crisis is attacking the heart of what Europe was about, and let me be very clear on this. And it's not about this issue of solidarity between the North and the South, which is also very relevant. It's much more important than this. Europe was about, the whole idea of building politically Europe, the European Union, was about two basic ideas. One, people should be free to move and contact each other, because this is good for everyone. It's good socially, it's good psychologically, as Cristina would say, it's good economically because then they trade, and it's good for world peace because people who know each other tend to fight less and tend to go to war less. And this crisis is attacking this. It's attacking the freedom of movement. And we're seeing different countries within different member states within the Union try to protect themselves from not only from the world, but from the member states of the European Union. This is very dangerous. And second, it's attacking the idea that through commerce, through trade, people and countries prosper. And we are seeing the reestablishment of trade barriers within the European Union. This is very, very dangerous. Of course, the issue of the euro, I don't have time to go into that. Everybody's talking about that. I don't think it's the most important point. It's this issue of moving people and moving goods within Europe, which is at the heart of what Europe means for the world.
Okay, thank you very much,
okay.
Fernando.
Sorry it took some time.
No. Sami, can you talk a little bit about this balance between equity and debt?
Yes, let me first highlight one important point. Before the COVID crisis, people thought that robots might be dangerous to the economy. Now we realize, well, baby robots are healthy to the economy because they don't get COVID virus, as far as I know. Is that true, Dr. Jesus? Well, as long as robots, they don't catch the virus, then maybe we can develop this further in a way that is very useful to the society and the economy. And this brings us to other automation and technology, e-commerce, which I hope will help trade across countries, because you have trade without contact. So e-commerce would fill this gap or help to solve this challenge, how to have trade across countries without direct contact or with minimum contact with people. We need redistribution of wealth. That is extremely important. We know that wealth inequality is very, very severe, and that is taking a toll on providing public goods like health care and other public good services. So with redistribution of wealth, we are able, inshallah, to build a good safety net that would provide good support to public goods, including research, medical research. I think you all agree that we have been seeing a drop in R&D budgets across, across the board, almost in many different countries. So this is not healthy. Now we know we really need R&D budget. We really need, because this is something essential for everyone. If we get to data and equity, yes, we have to accept the fact that if we are living in a risky universe, we cannot depend on riskless financing. This idea of no risk is just against the nature of the world that we are living in. So we have to readjust our financial system to accept the idea that anything that says risk-free is just a myth. To say there is something risk-free is just a myth. It's impossible to have something risk-free. So we need to rebuild our financial system to include these concepts. One of the ideas that Brother Hisham mentioned, whether to support companies or corporations or individuals, and this brings in the idea of universal income. Honestly, I do not have solid, concrete view on this issue, but I think this is a very promising idea to go. If we combine redistribution of wealth with universal income, at least for certain groups, I think this would change the way the economy and would give more flexibility and support to the economy. Finally, this pandemic shows that we really need green policies. We need to keep the health of people and the health of the earth that we are living in. We cannot separate these two. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sami. Dr. Omar, I think...
Yes. Okay. In less than a minute, as the Zakah issue is raised by a question, I believe that your good center in Madrid can organize such a virtual conference or seminar about the social finance, because in the Nobel Prize of 2019 has been given to a book in alleviating poverty. And this means that the whole world is concerned about how we solve problems. Islamic economics has a lot to say about how we can solve problems of poverty around the world. I hope you get this initiative.
Yeah, I will take it. And Gonzalo, that is the General Director of SCIEF, is here as well. And I'm sure he's taking notes, because one of the seminars we'll do definitely is on Awqaf or Zakat, because to me, I think that both of them are wonderful instruments for the situation we're living.
Thank you.
You want to say a final comment on the economy and the future of, if you have to choose like one great economic policy to follow, which one that will be?
Myself?
Yeah.
Yes, I think the fiscal policy, which this poverty alleviation policy is part of that, I will give it a priority in all countries to look at this fiscal policy. Monetary policy is something very complicated, more complicated than fiscal policy. But we should start with the fiscal policy.
Totally agree. Thank you. And Cristina, any very, very brief, because we already are out of time.
Yeah,
Can you tell us something about this burnout of the doctors?
Yes,
I have a couple of doctors in the family, and I felt they were.
I can say that they were already at risk of burnout before the crisis. All the health workers and mental health workers, those jobs are hard. You carry a lot of responsibility and burden on your shoulders. So I would say, yes, they were at risk, they're at greater risk now, and they need care and supports for them. So I'll just leave it at that. We need to take care of the ones that take care of us.
Thank you very much, Cristina. And well, Jesus, perhaps a last word about the medical, just asking funds. Perhaps somebody in this chat have enough funds and they can finance your research.
I hope so. Is my desire. So yes, just a comment. And this, I think, is very important. This is the first pandemic in the 20th century, but probably not the last. Probably not the last. We are connecting in a global village. So if we are connecting in a global village, they present some dangers, but we can react faster. And we need to share medical information. It is very problematic. If we get a big amount of high quality information, we can react. If the information comes very quickly, we can react. If you don't share information and we close frontiers, we get a great problem in the next pandemic. And I'm sure of that. I developed COVID-19 in 2 weeks, and now, so it's not the problem. It's a problem now, but in the few years, probably the information, the communication among countries could be the solution, is my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And I hope, as you often say, like that the governments will finance the research and the universities will finance research, because I really think more than ever that we really need high-level research. I'm sorry, I know there were more questions. I can see that they were not answered. There are a couple of people who still have their hands raised, but we make a compromise that it was an hour. It's been already an hour and 10 minutes. I think it's enough, but will be more. So I will invite you, all of you, to come back. I would like to thank my colleagues from the Islamic Economics Institute of the CAU, King Abdulaziz University, Dr. Turkistani, Dr. Barbesi, Dr. Mohammed Nassef, that I think is here as well, Faisal Atbani. They've really been helpful in putting together this seminar. I also would like to thank Gonzalo that they put these wonderful panelists together in such a short time. But we're gonna begin a series of different seminars, so you're all welcome to come. And some of the speakers will be the same, some will be changing. We'll try to have like more dialogues between two people so we can go a little more in depth. This was like a general vision, and now we'll go more in depth into the different scenarios and the different expertise. To the panelists, shukran kathiran, thank you very much. I'd like to also take this opportunity to wish you all Karim, Ramadan Karim, ukulla sana wa antum bi khairin, because I know next week is the Ramadan holiday, and shukran kathiran, u sanaltaka an el Karib inshallah.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Shukran.
Shukran.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Goodbye, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.